are live.
What's up, Facebook?
Who wears a number of hats.
The opportunity to share.
She's one of our own. It has been
They aren't like
parts to your story that I think. That's awesome. You found healing. You found
until I got so bad.
Can't wait for her to share the different aspects of your story and what awesome.
Right.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to this very special episode of Rooted Recovery Stories. My name is Patrick Custer, and I'm the National Director of Alumni for Promises Behavioral Health. It is National Recovery Month, and we are so excited to have a special lineup of speakers sharing their story and their walk through recovery with you all every week this month. And with that, I am going to introduce and bring in our special guest, Austin Cooper from Sober Evolution. This is the first time we've had him on our show, and I'm so glad to have you. Austin, thanks for agreeing to be here.
Well, thank you very much for inviting me to be a part of this. I think it's wonderful what you guys are doing, and so it's truly an honor to be here. I really do appreciate it.
Awesome. So tell me a little bit about Sober Evolution.
Yeah, sure. So Sober Evolution, I just started it a few years back in 2016 on Instagram and, grew it from there onto Facebook, eventually into a website. And, it really just became a pretty cool online space just where people can gain experience, strength, and hope. And that's, what I've continued to do for the past 4 years. Originally it was just a space where I could almost vent out, my own experiences. So really it was geared towards helping me. But it was just amazing how many people from all around the world really started connecting and gaining some sort of value out of it. And so I mean, on top of helping me, I get to help other people through sharing that experience. So yeah, it's primarily on Instagram. Currently working on redoing my entire website right now just to make it 10 times nicer. And I think with a lot more resources. So that's a work in progress. But other than that, I just absolutely love being able to put time into it.
Very cool. Do you mind sharing with us your Instagram handle and website, just in case anybody wants to check it out?
Yeah, so it's my Instagram handle is just at Sober Evolution. And, right now, as I mentioned, I'm working on the website, so currently took it down, but
Sure.
It will be soberevolution.net. And so I look forward to launching that. And I'm sure when I'm about to, I'm going to post all about it. So you'll see it on Instagram.
Totally excited to see it when it's there. Awesome. Well, so to the meat of the matter, I'm excited to hear about your journey and your story, and I know our listeners are as well. So let's get to it. So where did you start out? What was the beginning of Austin and everything after?
Yeah, so I grew up in Columbus, Ohio. I currently live down in Tampa, Florida. But yeah, I grew up Columbus, Ohio, and I know my story's gonna the beginning of my story, is gonna differ from pretty much everybody else's. I think that's what's really neat is we all have, our unique upbringings, but we all have that common bond of, the addiction aspect and then the recovery aspect as well. But,
Yeah.
I grew up, I had a really, great family, very blessed, supportive family. But, towards the end of my elementary school years, I just experienced getting picked on even just a little bit. But it really destroyed my self-image. And, I became very depressed and anxious and, had very low self-esteem because of that. Now, a few years later, when I was first introduced to alcohol, I was 15 years old. The second that I felt any sort of buzz, all of a sudden it's like, all that low self-esteem went away, my anxiety went away, and my depression went away. And right then and there, I fell in love with alcohol. Not long after that, experimented, started smoking marijuana, and I fell in love with that too. From there, it, led to cocaine and pills and hallucinogens and things like that. So what I really loved was going outside of my normal state of mind, because my normal state of mind to me was a self-conscious, low self-esteem, anxious, depressed person. So, being outside of my state of mind changed that all around for me. And, unfortunately, that's what I started prioritizing everything around. I think a lot of people, can relate to this who are listening right now, is that my priorities, went from, being my education, work, family, friends, it all just turned around strictly to drugs and alcohol. So, unfortunately, my grades started to fail. I, luckily got into college, but I was more focused. I thought the greatest thing in the world was that I had so much freedom in college and I could do whatever I wanted, and my parents didn't have to, get any sort of phone call. So, every chance I got, I would be drinking or using drugs. The people I started hanging around changed, and my relationships with my family and the friends that I grew up with completely changed and became strained. And that's what led to the lowest points of my life. Not long after that, ended up dropping out of college. I would be struggling with my job, and I can't believe that I held my job for any period of time after dropping out of college. you know a lot of my life revolved around lying to get out of situations, or to try to help stick in certain situations, one of which was my job, lying about still going to college so that they could have me on as a paid intern. And that lasted for years. So, between that and just higher use of drugs and everything, I couldn't afford, my bills. I, was becoming increasingly depressed and anxious. So by a certain point, before I knew it, when I was completely dependent on these drugs and alcohol to feel a certain way, well, unfortunately, I needed more and more and more to feel anything. For the most part, even getting drunk or even getting high didn't do anything for me, except, the complete opposite of what it originally did when I was 15 years old. It just, kept driving down my, emotions, and just made me completely an anxious person all around. I was absolutely miserable. And eventually I moved home with my parents. And that's when, my daily drinking and daily drug use would started, to try to, mask, I guess my shame of having to move home, in my mid 20s. Um, and at that point, really, I was feeling suicidal. I really did not want to live anymore because of how ashamed I was of myself. All of my goals and aspirations, I didn't have those anymore. I didn't feel like I had anything to live for. So that's when, things really, really took a nosedive. I would be stealing, medication from my parents. And I remember, I think one of the lowest points that I ever had was stealing my dad's medication that he had after he had an operation to remove cancer from him. So he had painkillers. And I knew what I was taking, and I knew the risks that I was taking by taking excessive amounts of that. So I remember unlocking my bedroom door in my parents' house because I thought this could be it. This might be the day that I die. And I don't want my parents to have to break down this door to find my body. So that was such a low point. And it's really interesting because at that same exact time, I remember seeing someone who actually used to deal me drugs, but someone who had addiction problems of his own. I saw him go on Facebook and tell everybody, the entire world, which I had never seen anybody do anything like this before, but told the entire world he's going to rehab. And I was just
Wow.
like, man, like that is really brave. Like how vulnerable can someone be?
Yeah.
And, I admired it. You know, didn't think anything bad of him. I was just like, man, like that's brave. That's something that I've never had the courage to do before. And, months pass by and I start seeing him post again that he's, out of rehab and talking, to the public essentially about all of his life changes and his mindset changes and the goals that he was accomplishing, throughout that process. And some of those goals aligned with some of the goals that I used to have before, I threw all those out the window. And I just thought, man, maybe if I, asked for help or if I, went to treatment, maybe I too could start accomplishing those goals that at the time I thought were impossible. You know, as amazing as that was, I still didn't have the courage to ask for help. I still had, lower points in my life that I, started experiencing. My family, I became a stranger to my family in their own house. I would not interact with them at all. And it really was nothing that they ever did. I mean, they loved me with
Hmm.
all their heart. I would convince myself that they didn't. And I would, come up with these justifications or excuses and, just this and that. And that would just, justify me staying in my room and, sneaking in there with alcohol or drugs. Um, but my family obviously noticed.
Sure.
And one day I was at work, one of the last days I worked there. And my boss asked me to go to a company meeting. And so I thought, okay, this, maybe I haven't been on a business meeting in a little while. So it was, threw me off a little bit. But at the same time, it was like, okay, I'll go to a meeting with you. So we drove to this building that I had never seen before. And at the time, I was working for a civil engineering firm. And, I kind of had an idea of the different meeting places that we had. And this wasn't one of them. And a couple red flags came up, and I remember he walked me to this door, and some woman answered, and she said, "Are you Austin?" And I said, "Yeah." And my heart was racing. I thought, I was walking in like I was going to be sued or something from my company, because really I would go into work and just surf the internet all day instead of getting anything done. So I thought, I don't know, maybe there's some law that I was breaking, and that I was going to be sued for being paid for doing nothing. Um, but anyway, she walked me to this other door, and all of a sudden I see the door open. And the first thing I noticed is my family was sitting right there. And
Mm.
my life literally flashed before my eyes. I wasn't sure if this was my family telling me that someone had died.
Yep.
And my other thought was, this is an intervention.
Yep.
Um, and I knew, I don't know how or why, but I knew that if this was an intervention, I cannot think about my answer too long. Otherwise, I will talk
Mm.
myself out of accepting the help that I need. Um, and of course, my friend who had gotten help and who had really built his life up, since then flashed before my eyes. So he had, planted this seed that, I credit so much of me accepting treatment too. And as soon as the door opened, they didn't even say anything. I just said, "Yes, I'm ready. Let's go." um, and they said, "Okay, well, let us talk to you first. We've spent a lot of time, putting this intervention together." And I said, "Okay, okay." And they all read me these heartfelt letters that they had written of who I was growing up. The joyful kid, growing up and with this amazing family, and they were 100% right. And then their letters would go into what things have been like, the changes that have happened over the years of me prioritizing my life around drugs and alcohol. And that was 100% right too. There was no more denying it at that point. As much as I had denied it all before, this was me admitting to myself that I had a problem and that I needed help. And lo and behold, started on our way to treatment, and I was terrified. I mean, I didn't know what life was like without drugs and alcohol. That's all I had known. That was the only somewhat sense of joy I had had in 10 plus years.
Yeah.
And
Do you remember
it,
thinking? Do you remember thinking at that point? Because man, I have to tell you right now, I'm blown away at how many parts of your story I identify with. Probably more than anybody I've ever interviewed on the show, and I, right at that point you're talking about, I remember thinking, I don't remember what it's like, what it feels like in my brain and my body to not have something influencing me to feel okay. I can't remember what that felt like back at whatever point that was. And that was the scary. I mean, it wasn't just what will it be like in the future. Like, I can't think about what it'll be like in the future because like the past of that ever being reality is completely escaping me. I think a lot of people probably feel that, but I just think it's interesting how you describe that. So I just wanted to point that out.
Yeah, I mean, it was the most terrifying moment, I think of all, or of my life at that point. You're venturing into the complete unknown.
Yeah.
It is the biggest leap of faith, that we had to experience. And, it almost feels like we're about to jump off a cliff into a free fall and we don't know, when we're going to land, how we're going to land, and it's absolutely terrifying. I mean, that's what, for years and years, knowing, that my life was going downhill, that's what I was afraid of. And that's what prevented me really from asking for help before, is just the fear of the unknown. But the thing is, it is a leap of faith, you know, and that's why, you and I tell our stories, is to show other people who are struggling right now and who are afraid, to take that leap of faith, to say, look, there is ground, and, it's right there. And there are millions of people across this planet who have experienced it. And not only that, but who are here to catch you and help you and help build you up. And, that's the thing that I didn't realize, but I realized pretty soon after I, arrived at the treatment facility. They would bring in all sorts of, people with this experience, strength, and hope, who, they weren't being paid this treatment center to tell us their story. They were doing it because people had done that for them and had helped them get, time in their recovery and help them accomplish, these incredible goals in life. And I was just like, man, like that's something special and something that I didn't expect, to have this support system all around me. And I was fascinated with that. And soon after, it was funny because, like, at that point, especially, having the recent situation at the time where, I thought I was going to die, and I was, okay with that. Well, being sober, even right in the beginning, it was like, man, I don't want to die. Like, I see all these people doing these amazing things. I want to do that too. So I need to figure out, how to live. And, the way to do that's obviously going to be through sobriety, because I will die if I go back. So I knew, this wasn't pass or fail. This wasn't a class, that I was going to for 3 weeks. This is teaching me how to live opposed to die. So it's not pass or fail. This is, live or die. And I asked, some of the attendants there, I was like, I need a pen and paper because I don't want to miss anything, because I want to make this work. I want to live my life, as much as I hate to say it. I want to live my life out, in recovery, because I know I'll die if I don't. And they gave me a pen and paper, and I was like a little student, and I, obviously dropped out of school because at that time I hated, being a student. But all of a sudden, my priorities had to change, and one of them was to becoming a student of life. And, I took it seriously to where I was writing notes. I was writing notes when people were telling their stories, when, doctors would come in and teach about the physiology, and some of the things that would help me with my anxiety and my depression, especially early in recovery when we're so dependent on alcohol and drugs to feel a certain way. Well, our brain literally cannot naturally produce dopamine and serotonin, the feel good chemicals. And so our bodies have to figure out how to produce that stuff naturally again. So, I'm like, oh, okay. So exercise, that's one of the things that can help. Eating healthy, that's another thing that can help. Surrounding myself around, positive people that encourage me, that can help. And I started doing all of those. I didn't want to miss a single thing. And I think that early on getting organized with doing those things that helped me feel better, really helped, and really trying to figure out, why I was depressed and why I was anxious. And it was really interesting because my entire life I didn't know why I suffered from anxiety or depression or low self-esteem until I really worked on figuring that out. And when I figured that out, I was like, okay, I can deal with this. I can figure out how to deal with this. And, that ultimately was the foundation of my recovery, was figuring out the whys and figuring out what I could do to make changes. And, I mean, the rest is just actively doing that. And, so 2013, that was when I went to treatment. And right from the get go, out of treatment, I was like, okay, I've got to continue this, and I've got my boundaries, because I knew that maybe certain people in my life, whether it's family members or friends or places I used to hang out, I've got to set these boundaries. And if people try to cross over into those boundaries and do anything that is going to risk me going back out, I have to treat it like that. Those people or those things are trying to kill me. And so I took that very seriously from the get go. And, it sucked to have to leave certain friendships behind because I had known those people for so long. It sucked to not, do certain activities because I was so used to doing those for so long and that's all I knew. But, it was again being a student of life and figuring out other things and alternatives, that I could learn to enjoy. And, one of those things was reading personal development books, which is, I thought those were the dumbest thing. It's just all this, crap that people are just trying to, sell me on. They're just trying to sell copies of their books or whatever. But,
Yeah.
I met some business professionals who kind of almost became like mentors to me and coaches, and they weren't even in recovery. I had similar goals in life as them. And they were like, here, read, Think and Grow Rich, or, read this Dream Big book or whatever, it was. And I was like, okay, I'm just going to suck it up and I'm going to pick up a book for the first time since, high school, and I'm going to read them. And what was really interesting is that I found that the principles of, success in business align exactly with the principles of recovery and exactly with the principles of, fitness and, sports and really everything. So what amazed me was just the principles of success are basically the principles of life. And I was fascinated right from the get-go of the similarities. And that's when I was like, I would read certain quotes and it would just completely change my frame of mind, my mindset. It would change my habits, and ultimately make my life a little bit better. And one of the things I did, after a few years of being in recovery and a few years of really focusing on that personal development, I was like, I wonder how I can, you know, save this stuff, and not forget it. And that's when I started Sober Evolution, because I wanted to put these quotes somewhere that I could always revert back to. And I could see what my frame of mind was at that because I can write out my comments in there. And that's how Sober Evolution started. And, again, it was like a personal blog for me, with pictures of quotes and, stuff like that. And that's just when everything changed in regards to figuring out how much helping other people helped me in my own recovery. And so, that's what's led to some amazing stuff in my life, and that's what's led to where I'm at now. So that's my story in short. I know I was short or long, however you want to perceive it, but
Oh, it's great. Hey, you know what? I think that it's always exactly what it's supposed to be. And so, I wanted to ask if you, kind of wanted to give a word of encouragement, or, just speak to anybody who may be watching that's on the fence, questioning, kind of like you were when that person, that your friend, made that impact on you so much. Are there any words of wisdom, encouragement, or anything you want to speak to that person that might be watching today?
Yeah, I mean, if I could go back when I was on the fence about whether or not I had a problem with alcohol or drugs, I had a problem with alcohol or drugs. If that was even barely even a question in my mind, the truth was I did. And that's when the best time to ask for help is. So you don't have to risk going down this, dark tunnel that I went down, of, feeling suicidal and not caring if I lived or died, dropping out of school, struggling at, my job, ruining relationships. I think right in the instance where you think you might have a problem, that's a great time to start searching for solutions. And the great thing about today's day and age is there are so many different resources, there are so many different pathways of recovery that are out there, and so many people that will be thrilled if you reach out. One of the biggest things is I am thrilled every time someone reaches out to me for help. And a lot of times they started off with, "I'm sorry to bother you." You probably get a lot of messages. It's like, no, when you reach out to me and I get to tell you my experience, that helps me too. And so I'm thrilled that you reach out. And so I think, for someone who is on the edge or who might want to get some questions answered, understand that when you ask for help, you're helping someone else too, and they are there for you. So yeah, I just think the biggest thing is, reach out to someone, see if they can get some resources over to you. And the internet is just full of these great resources that are out there, and I'd say take advantage of it.
Absolutely. With that, I'll just comment a couple last things. I think one of the most common themes for those of us who struggle with mental health and addiction, or let's just say life, is getting to a place where we are willing to get uncomfortable and ask for help is it's hard. And so, but it's so rewarding. It's always rewarding. And just to echo what you said, there's so many different resources available to you if you're considering potentially, questioning whether or not, treatment might be a solution for you. You can confidentially also reach out to our admissions line, scrolling across your screen below, and we will be more than happy to have that conversation with you or guide you to other resources if that's what is needed for you. But, everyone has a different path of healing that they walk, and sometimes that looks different and takes many different turns from start to finish. So if we can be of any help to you whatsoever at the Promises Behavioral Health family, we would love to. Or you can reach out to Austin at Sober Evolution and on his Instagram. And just, one last thing, I want to thank you, Austin, so much for your time today, coming on here, sharing, getting vulnerable, and also just thank everybody for watching. The miracle of recovery is real and alive, and we're just so glad to be able to be a conduit to help people access that in this day and age. So with that, I hope, Austin, I hope you have a great day today and everyone else watching, and we are out.
All right. Thank you.